As the immigration debate rages on, Democrats warn Americans that President Trump's policies will lead to skyrocketing unemployment among child traffickers. Experts have concluded that deporting illegal aliens and cracking down on border security will eventually have a significant negative impact on the economy, access to unvetted pharmaceuticals, and perhaps most concerning, the child trafficking industry. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer stated to the press, "Make sure everyone knows President Trump wants to eliminate a bunch of jobs. These reckless policies under his new administration will be devastating to child trafficking businesses across the country and likely result in vast numbers of kidnappers, smugglers, and other criminals being put out of their jobs. Leave it to Republicans to declare war on workers." We spoke to Luis Hernandez, who has been a hard-working human trafficker for over 10 years. Luis expressed serious concerns that Trump's policies could affect his employment status.
I'll be out of work here before too long. It's like Trump doesn't even consider what effect this might have on an entire industry. We knew Joe Biden and the Democrats would always have measures in place that would keep our jobs secure, but Trump, he's sending us out to dry.
Experts speculate that if child traffickers are unable to find work, American citizens are unlikely to fill the void.
Well, many Americans simply don't want to kidnap kids. It's a job that your average citizen thinks of as beneath them, which is really quite unfortunate.
Democrats also warn that securing the border will likely cause a catastrophic shortage of black market fentanyl. Coming up, Illinois Governor Jay Pritzker vows to eat an entire extra-large deep dish meat lover's pizza every day until Trump is stopped.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. Straight ahead, a look at the Trump effect on Gaza, China, and DEI. Victoria Coates, Gordon Chang, and Meaghon are here. She was in the room where it happened. Not Alexander Hamilton, Alexandra Bougher. Sketch comedy from Nick Peterson and the Babylon Bee. And for the first time ever, Grammy winner Benson Boone in the spotlight. And now, a man from Times Square who is not offended in the least that he can no longer identify as a female shot put artist. Here's the...
I did not approve that copy. I've never... Two things I've never wanted to do. I've never wanted to identify as a female, and I've never wanted to put shot. I've wanted to shoot some buckshot. I like that. That's fun. Making the loud things come out of the end of the gun. Bang. That's always fun. But no shot putting for me. So I'm sorry, Dave. Your sources, as usual, are deeply misinformed, and sadly, to the denigration of our finer female audience members, because they just end up thinking we guys are slugs when you say stuff like that. So, that's all on you. Welcome to the weekend, friend. Thank you for being here. What a week it was. And I hope you're not getting tired of hearing that, because that's going to be the recurring theme for just about the duration of the Trump administration. I think every week he's going to blow people's minds in ways we hadn't even begun to think of. Who would have thought, turn Gaza into the Riviera? Well, you have to seed land. You have to understand the potential of land. You have to figure out what exactly it can be, how it can be done. But man, what an idea. And he's gonna, you got people like Fetterman and other Democrats that are in favor of it. You've got, I heard from people on both sides of the political aisle after the speech was given. What a brilliant idea. Instead of, and you say, well, what's the other option? Establishing a propped up democracy that continues to elect terrorists to run it so that they can be bought off by Iran so that they can continue to attack Israel. That's the option? Yeah, I'll take the U.S. taking control of it, please, for 5,000, Alex. And, you know, Palestinians that want to live in peace with their neighbors, Palestinians that don't want to be part of terrorist groups, you can come on back home. It's going to be so beautiful when we're done. It's a toilet right now. You can't live in it. It's all a bunch of pile of nothing. There's no one that can live there. But once we clear out all that trash, once we get the hostages released, kill all of Hamas, take the trash out, get rid of all of the debris, and start building actual things there, it's going to be amazing. So just watch, friends. It's going to be one of the most beautiful places. The way people talk about Dubai and some of the other places in the Middle East, or like Singapore, it's going to be amazing. And if you run it with very tight security and you do not let people in there that have terrorist leanings or inclinations, much less capacities, and you put a U.S. air base right there. Put a U.S. air base right there. We lost the one in Afghanistan because of old what's his name, Brandon, that we just got rid of. What an idiot. We gave up the nicest military base that we've ever had on planet Earth. This one is not going to be super close to where that one was, but it's still in the region. And at the end of the day, it's not a bad place for us to have a base. And I'm thinking, if you've got a military base there, why not just add to that by putting one more carrier right off the shore in the waters that Gaza would have access to? So put a carrier, put an air base, load it up with American personnel that want to serve their country in a very beautiful scene, and become the best next door neighbor to Israel that they've ever had. Come on. Israel's going to feel good about it because they're going to feel like America's got their back. They're not going to have to be, worried about what's going to come over that southern border all the time. And then they can just take care of whatever's going on the West Bank, and everybody's happy. It's a win-win-win situation. I've talked to Arabs about it. I've talked to Jews about it. I've talked to people that are left of center. I've talked to people that are right of center. Now, I'm not saying everybody on the planet is in favor of the idea, but it's a good idea. And I was gobsmacked when I turned on the TV Tuesday night and heard it. I'm going to get Victoria Coates in here to talk about this. She's written a great book on Israel and what needs to happen in that region, and I think she's going to have some particularly good insight. But, there's a lot of people, not just the transgender shot putters, but there's a lot of people that are not very pleased with President Trump's orders this week. And I've figured out that they mostly fall into two categories: human traffickers and beta males. Well, I guess there's a third category: women who love them, like Jasmine Crockett from wherever she's from, the congresswoman. She's part of the squad. She's all sassy. She wears lots of eye makeup. She thinks that it's a horrible idea that the president sign an executive order, surrounded, I might add, by thousands of women. There was at least 1,000 women in the West Wing. I've been in the room. By eyeballing it, it looked like there had to be 1,000 women in there. Even if it's not, if it was just several hundred, it's still a lot. And they weren't sitting there going, "Oh, the president's taking our rights away as women." No, because you know why? No woman in America thinks that except Jasmine Crockett. Crazy lady. All other women are very thankful. You know why they're thankful? That when they go into the bathroom, they're not going to find an unwelcome surprise from the other gender, from the other sex. When they go into their health club and they're tired and sweaty from their yoga, they just want to go take their shower. They don't want to walk into the shower where some person has a different appendage. They don't want that. They want to have confidence that a woman's space is going to be a woman's space, and it's not going to be invaded by pervy, creeped out, geeky guys. And that's been the problem. Now, if you are someone that truly struggles with issues of not understanding your gender and your body talking to your brain and thinking that there's something different there, there's a good place to go and work all of that out. And it's called counseling. And there are lots of people of mainstream secular training, faith-based training. There's people that are all over the map that would love to help you understand that and come to grips with it. But you don't get to go peek on the little girls in the little girls' places just because you think that you're confused about why your body is one sex and your mind says it's something else. By the way, this is just the way it works. If your body says you're one thing, that's what you are. We don't need to trick the body into saying agree with the brain. We need to rethink the brain. We need to get the brain to understand that it's not the way it is with the body, so the brain is the one that's out of comportment. You got to get it in line with the rest of the biology. Huge show straight ahead. Huge week in America this week, friends. That, and we've got Grammy winner Benson Boone in the music spotlight tonight. Come on, how good is this? Stay here. It's That Kevin Show.
From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show, thatkevinshow.com for all things related, That Kevin Show on all socials to stay connected. Well, this week, when I say enormous surprise, I'm sitting there on Tuesday night, I'm flipping the channel, I land on a news channel, and there's the president wrapping up his joint press conference with Bibi Netanyahu. When's the last time we had a president that did a press conference? Anyway, there he is wrapping it up with Bibi Netanyahu, and across the crawl on the bottom, I see U.S. to take ownership of Gaza. Immediately, my brain starts to explode. I text KT McFarland, I text generals that we'd have on the show and stuff, and they're like, yeah, this is potentially real. Let's get some perspective on all this. Victoria Coates is the vice president at the Heritage Foundation for all things national security. She just released the book, The Battle for the Jewish State, and I'm expecting her to have some thoughts on this. Victoria, thank you for joining us. What did you have any clue that the president was thinking along these lines?
Well, good to be with you, Kevin. And yes, I do have some views on this. It did not come as a shock to me because I've heard him talk about it before.
Really?
That Gaza is this beautiful strip of land. It's on the Mediterranean. He referred to it as like a Riviera. And as a real estate professional, he sees that and thinks, wow, this could be developed. And when I spent a year working with Jason Greenblatt and Jared Kushner on their plan for the Palestinians. And one thing we looked at were a lot of reconstruction projects, desalination plants. There's a project called Gaza Marine, which is they've got natural gas in the waters off of Gaza, electricity, you name it. All of that planning has been done. And so I think, for the president looking at this situation, he very much wants to break the paradigm of the past, the paradigm of failure. And this for him was just kind of a natural extension of that.
Well, it seemed as though if you talk to people that were aware of he and Netanyahu's interactions earlier in the day, it seemed as though this idea had not been put forward, at least in their comments. They were kind of talking about a more traditional kind of outcome. And I guess if we want to break it down in stages, what does it look like? First, the war has to come to an end and all the hostages have to get released. And you've got to kind of get rid of the dredge that is still Hamas that are hanging out there. So what type of timetable do you think it looks like even before a shovel goes into the ground and something like this begins to become a reality?
Oh, I think we're looking at an extended timetable. And so, as you said, the first imperative, and I know this was a major topic of conversation yesterday, is getting the hostages out. And I think both the president and the prime minister know from the condition of the folks who have come out over the last 2 weeks, their condition is not good. So we don't have a lot of time here. So that's got to, winding up phase one of the current deal is critical. And then it does have to get mopped up. The war needs to be brought to a conclusion. We'll see if Hamas continues to honor their side of the ceasefire. They don't have a great track record in that regard. So there may be the necessity of Israel going back in to complete that operation. So yes, this is going to take at least a year, I would say, before a shovel were to go.
So let me ask you, because everything you just said has caused me to have more questions. Let's talk about the physical stewardship of the Gaza Strip at present. Whose legal property does it belong to? Is it part of the nation of Israel? Is it a freestanding state? What is the condition of ownership at present?
That's a great question, because Gaza is actually unique. Israel ceded ownership of Gaza when they withdrew at the behest of the George W. Bush administration in 2006. That was a unilateral move by then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon to do that. And so Israel currently does not claim it as sovereign territory, but there is no state of Gaza. It's not a nation in and of itself.
So who was ceded ownership of it?
Well, technically what was supposed to happen was the Palestinians were supposed to have elections. So that was their state, and they elected Hamas. And Hamas is a designated terrorist group, not a government. So as I said, this is a nebulous state. You may know the international law scholar Eugene Kontorovich, who just joined us at Heritage. And we were talking earlier this morning specifically on this topic and what was now possible in terms of somebody claiming sovereignty over Gaza.
Well, it seems to me that if Hamas is done away with, and that should be the outcome of the end of the war, that should be one of the conditions on which things are concluded, that Hamas is done. They can't have any more future. Then you don't have even the elected group that supposedly had elections. So in essence, the U.S. becomes the neighbor to Israel. If we take ownership of it, is it a territory like Puerto Rico, like Guam, like one of these places? Would they get voting rights? Like, how would it work?
Well, that's also to be determined. And I don't know that it would be ownership in terms of establishing a government, or if it would be ownership like you would own a property in the south of France, for example, which doesn't make you a rival state to France. Maybe it should, but currently doesn't. So it's, I think that again is to be determined, and whether this is a U.S. reconstruction project on Israeli territory, or if there's going to be a special status for the Strip.
There's a lot of people that have already been blurbing it in the media that Trump is going back on his long kind of held viewpoint of not being a nation builder. I immediately, once the words were on my TV screen last night, all these ideas went through my head. Strategic placement for the U.S. to have presence in Gaza. We could build a military base there. We could have another carrier kind of present in the Mediterranean that would probably tamp down some of the temptations by the Iranians and others to act badly, crazily every so often, as they tend to do. We could have a viable, important presence in the region and bring safety and security to Israel in a way that would really cement the partnership that we have with them. They're already our most important ally there. But the issue of nation building is something that his critics, who, by the way, didn't have any problems with Bush nation building, or a lot of other people saying that they wanted to do it, but somehow because Trump has said in the past he was on some level against it, they're looking at this and saying, is this not a violation of that? Let's take a quick break. When we come back, Victoria Coates, pick up on that. And then I want to talk about the importance of the U.S. having a presence there and the larger regional impact, particularly in the future of Israel as we move forward. Victoria Coates is the vice president at the Heritage Foundation for all things national security. Her book is called The Battle for the Jewish State. She is one of these experts that has been around since Rumsfeld was at Department of Defense and all the way now up to Hegseth. She's seen it all. She's known about all of it, and we're very honored to have her. Stay here.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, That Kevin Show. Victoria Coates is my special guest, and you've probably seen her all over media because she's been a nonstop, in-demand guest since the president made the important announcement that the U.S. would assume control of the Gaza Strip, and he called it the Riviera. Victoria, I immediately pictured Trump Tower residential buildings going up along the seashore there, kind of the way they dot the New York skyline here in Manhattan. But beyond that, he was asked, well, what about Palestinians and having a place to live? We're not talking about Hamas. We're talking about the peace-loving Palestinians that were kind of caught up in the middle of all this. How does that work? How does that, ultimately play out? Will this be just a rich person's Riviera, or will this be housing that really is able to help the Palestinians who are already there?
Well, starting with the nation building point, because I think this is important, is there's a very big difference between what the Bush administration tried to do in Afghanistan and Iraq, taking full sovereign countries and trying to rebuild the entire thing and, create Jeffersonian democracies across the Middle East. And I think what President Trump is talking about is commercial development. And that is a very different proposition. Now,
but can you divorce that away from governance, like whether it's municipal or kind of regional, like a state, or like a federal form? Who takes over that? Israel?
No, I do think there will have to be some, obviously security apparatus and civil services, but it's different from saying you must now become a democracy. And, those elections that the Palestinians had, they were almost 20 years ago. So it's not as if they have a thriving democracy that's been overthrown here. And so I think that is very different. And I think the president would say that is an issue for the Palestinians and Israelis to negotiate between themselves, which is what he's always said about the so-called two-state solution. So I think that is what he is envisioning, not, creating Virginia on the Mediterranean. And I think that's the important distinction there.
Does this play in any kind of sense an important role in the furtherance of the Abraham Accords? How does our presence in Gaza, for instance, impact the Saudis and their already kind of desire to get into those accords?
It could be a very interesting move. And to the point about where the Palestinians are going to go, the reason that the Egyptians and the Jordanians haven't taken them in, they under the United Nations Charter have the right to flee a war-torn land, but Egypt has said absolutely not. How about the women and children? And the problem is that the whole population has been so radicalized, and this isn't talked about very much in the U.S. press, but it's in the battle for the Jewish state. After the Hamas terrorists went into Israel on October 7th, there was a second wave of the so-called Palestinian Islamic Jihad, again, professional terrorists, trained terrorists. But after that, they were followed by more everyday civilians from Gaza who saw what had happened, saw the breach in the fence, picked up everything from axes to pistols and followed the terrorists through and participated, some making multiple trips for loot. So that population is hugely problematic and needs a de-radicalization program. This is something where our ally Morocco, also an Abraham Accords country, could play a huge role. So could Egypt. But that's going to be a heavy, heavy lift. But it has to be done, and it has to be done by a Muslim majority Arab country, or else it won't have any heft.
I've been to the region several times, and in discussions with people, the Palestinians share an ethnic DNA makeup that's very similar to the majority population in Jordan. You would think that being cousins or brothers and sisters even, that there would be a desire to to help in that way. Is it really going to be tough to find a partner that'll step up on that?
Well, Jordan has helped historically, and it's interesting. The Queen of Jordan is a Palestinian from East Bank in Jerusalem, so the Crown Prince of Jordan, quite frankly, is more Palestinian than Hashemite. So it's sort of an interesting dynamic there, and it's important to realize that Egypt and Jordan are two of the largest recipients of U.S. foreign aid, both security aid and then which we also give to Israel, but then they also get economic support, which we do not give to Israel. And so I think, both President al-Sisi and King Hussein are going to need to get to yes here with President Trump, because clearly what he's done this week to USAID, which I staunchly support, demonstrates he's going to take a different attitude toward those programs than his predecessor.
Victoria Coates, congratulations on the book. Kevin McCullough coming right back from New York. Stay here.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Back to Times Square, it's That Kevin Show. Glad to have you with us. All things related to it at thatkevinshow.com. That Kevin Show on all the social medias, and it's easy to find us, so come hang out. I want to turn to my next guest, who I have had long an appreciation for his knowledge of what is going on in Asia and the South Pacific, and as it relates to America's national security interest in foreign policy. Gordon Chang is his name. He's a contributor at Newsweek. You may see him at Fox News and some other places, but we're glad to have him. Gordon, good to see you. Happy New Year. Haven't talked to you since we flipped the calendar over.
Well, Happy New Year and Happy Lunar New Year.
That's it. Yes. That's it. Well, we snuck it in just before. Speaking of which, one of the things I've always been enlightened by our conversations is how differently the Chinese mind thinks than the Western mind. And I've been curious to ask you this since the election, but Joe Biden approach towards foreign policy to China, a Donald Trump approach towards foreign policy and to China. How do you size up the changes, and how do you think the Chinese are interpreting the changes, and what are they most concerned about, interested in, puzzled by?
I think that the Chinese regime is extremely concerned about Donald Trump, much more than they were about Joe Biden. And, it's not that Joe Biden did everything they wanted. He clearly didn't. But the thing about Biden was that, like previous American presidents, Biden was predictable. Biden tried to accommodate the Chinese, and and the Chinese could scope out his moves. And so, although the Beijing just abhorred some of the things that Biden did, especially during his last couple months in office, they were comfortable with him. They are not comfortable with Donald Trump. And that's not to say that they abhor everything he does. There's some things that he does that they absolutely love. But the problem for them is that they can't predict which Donald Trump they're going to get in the morning. And that unnerves them. And that means that they would actually, I think, prefer to have a generally hostile American president than to have someone like Trump, who some days is good to them, some days is horrible to them.
Let's talk about what that looks like, because I think the general consensus, if you asked Americans, they would say that they would think that Donald Trump would be seen as more hostile than Joe Biden. And I think it's just because he simply speaks tough and then enforces what he says. He says, I'm going to do this, and then he does it. So how is it that there are things, and I think this is part of Trump's key to his personality too, but he does have a way of ingratiating people, even people that he's trying to get exacting demands from.
Yes. And one of the things that the Chinese love about Trump is that he says nice things about Xi Jinping and about China. And those are things that China then uses to legitimize its rule back home. We Americans, we have a government which we may not like who our president is, but we believe the government is legitimate because we elect it. In China, you got to remember. So because of that, we don't think symbolism is important. It's not important to the safety or security of the United States. For a Chinese regime and for other hardline ones, symbolism is absolutely critical, which is the reason why they put their best people into propaganda. And that means we now have a situation where China loves some of the things that Trump says. But I think that ultimately, and this is where we're going down the road, is Trump is doing things that will, I think, fatally undermine the Communist Party rule. And so ultimately, although
do they see that? Do they anticipate that? Are they as keen on what? Are they observing what you're saying in terms of being a reality, or do they think that it's possible that it won't be?
Well, they think, the future is uncertain, so they're not absolutely sure. But they are, I think, worried about Trump because there are a couple of things that are going on right now, which ultimately the Chinese cannot withstand. And one of them is that Trump is strengthening the United States. And although he's irritating our allies, and the Chinese love that we're irritating our allies, nonetheless, they can see that Trump is willing to use American power to further American objectives. And Biden was not willing to do that by and large.
Right.
And so that's the one critical difference going forward that I think will unnerve the Chinese and believe that the United States is going to act in its own interest and therefore is going to do things which will either intentionally or unintentionally take down the Chinese regime. So I think that ultimately they're worried.
I was speaking with our mutual friend, Katie McFarland this week, who has a lot of experience in the national security stage. And she talks about a concept that Trump seems to master far more than any other American president has, and it's economic leverage. How does that fit into the picture with the Chinese?
Couple things. I'm sure KT talked about energy, which is something that we Americans don't appreciate the importance of. But there's also tariffs. And Trump is absolutely determined to build a tariff wall around the United States. And that is especially important for China right now, because Xi Jinping has turned his back on consumption as the foundation for the Chinese economy, which means that he has only one way to rescue an increasingly desperate situation, and that is to export more to the world. U.S. is the largest export market in the world by far. It cannot be replaced in any reasonable time frame. And if China is shut out of the United States, that means that Beijing has no way to continue its not only economy, but the regime itself. So you put the energy moves that Trump is making, in addition with his tariff moves, these are things that China cannot counter.
Well, and let's talk about the energy component for a second, because I've long advocated that what Joe Biden could have done to improve America's energy crisis was to begin drilling again. You bankrupt Russia and the mullahs in Iran when that happens, but does it have a negative impact on China if we go into heavy production of energy resources?
Oh, China would like that. And first of all, I agree with you. You go back, what Reagan did with the Soviet Union was to lower the price of commodities, which bankrupted ultimately the Soviet Union, which means it could not continue its challenge to the United States and the world. Trump, I think, wants to do the same thing.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.
Somewhere in the bowels of the city that never sleeps,
Kevin McCullough, radio host with Salem Media,
is a man also not sleeping.
Syndicated radio talk show host Kevin McCullough.
And that guy would like a word with you.
Many of you know him as Nostradamus.
Of course that Kevin show is going to be great. The only thing that could be greater, of course, would be that Donald show. We don't have that, so we have that Kevin show.
Featuring the music of Dick Tunney and the Dream in Color Orchestra. To come, the death of DEI with Meaghon mobs. History has had her eyes on him. From the room where it happened, Alexandra Bougher. Assignment Desk Weekend sketch comedy from the Babylon Bee and Nick Peterson. And Benson Boone returns to the spotlight. And now, from Times Square, the man who can no longer sign the back of his USAID check, saying, "Make it out to cash, please." Here's the Kevin!
Man, those guys jam. Love listening to the Dream in Color Orchestra. Yeah, you know, I'm not the only one not cashing USAID checks anymore. Trump's going to stop spending $5 billion for power stations that don't even work. And then I love the sassiness of Michael Rappaport, the actor. I haven't always liked him, but I liked him lately. Because he's like, hey, why not let Trump take over Gaza? What do we have to lose? Nothing's been working there anyway, so seriously, what? Just be practical about it. All right, let's get to the actual news. Here we go. For Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough. The House of Representatives have passed a bill in the interest of keeping the American energy flowing in the future. The bill will block future presidents from being able to ban oil drilling and exploration without approval from Congress. Assignment Desk Weekend would like to remind you that those crazy high gas prices you've lived with for the past 4 years were the result of just that. A dementia-addled crank who ended drilling willy-nilly. It's a very scientific term. The new legislation also gives the Speaker of the House some unusual powers of response if a future president does attempt to ban drilling while on their watch. The Speaker, whoever he or she may be, under such circumstances, will now be allowed to give said president a noogie on nationwide broadcast and then march the president through the streets of Washington, D.C. while hitting a gong and proclaiming, "Shame, shame, shame." Southern California state-subsidized SoCal Edison is now questioning whether its decrepit equipment might have actually started the Hearst and Eaton fires that destroyed roughly 130,000 acres last month. They are investigating the questions because California Governor Gavin Newsom is scared to death that a state-run utility might indicate the state itself was not fully up to the task of public safety, as if entire villages burning to the ground without any water to fight the fires on hand hadn't already convinced most of the residents of Southern California. And finally, after learning that USAID was subsidizing journalism outlets to the tune of millions of dollars last week, I believe in Politico it was annually about $8 million in total, more and more voices are now calling for the closing of NPR and the Public Broadcast Foundation. Assignment Desk Weekend can't disagree. In fact, to be honest, the fundraisers that NPR and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting are constantly having are getting to be too often in frequency, and one can only take having a Jonas brother butcher a significant Les Mis role for only so long. So that's your update. And go Chiefs, trounce the Eagles, and for Assignment Desk Weekend, I'm Kevin McCullough.
Deadly plague sweeping over Great Britain. This cancerous plague threatens everything: our nation, our culture, our values, and everything we hold dear. If it is not stopped, we might lose our homeland forever. This terrible disease is bigotry. That is why, as proud citizens of Great Britain, we must all keep a stiff upper lip and do our part to avoid bigotry, racism, and Islamophobia. Here are just a few helpful tips to help you avoid the stain of bigotry whilst you're being raped, stabbed, or blown up by Pakistani migrants. When an Islamic migrant approaches you and begins repeatedly thrusting a knife into your torso or face area, remember this. White British citizens sometimes stab people too, and you should be ashamed of yourself for thinking people stabbing is a Muslim thing. While the attacker stabs you, close your eyes and try to picture him as a white male. This simple meditation will help your bias melt away like clotted cream on a toasty, crumpeted tea time. Cheers, old boy. You've done it. If you are a woman, always remember to wear modest clothing. Ideally, clothing should cover your legs, your ankle, your face, your eyes, and everything else. Take a look at Elizabeth here. Now that's an attractive and safe look for England's streets. Failing to wear the proper attire could lead to men of undetermined religion and national origin succumbing to their baser instincts, making you a target. So, do the right thing for England and cover up. That a girl, Elizabeth. Avoid regressive and offensive British terms, such as cheerio, codswallop, or throw a wobbly. Instead, use more inclusive terms, such as Allahu Akbar, or Allahu or Death to Israel. This makes British Muslims feel welcome. If you've done all these things and still have feelings of bigotry, simply submit to the Holy Quran and acknowledge Muhammad as the one true prophet of Allah. Then, follow all the tenets of Islam, pray 5 times per day facing Mecca, and maybe even stab another British person while shouting Allahu Akbar. Congratulations! You have completely rid yourself of the stain of bigotry. And as the evil dictator Winston Churchill once said, keep calm and carry on.
All right, let's get those categories up on the board. And Nick, you're first to choose.
Okay. Let's go Who Cares for 200.
We would all be grateful if we never heard about this relationship ever again. Nick, who is Will Smith and Jada Pinkett?
That's it. How is this real for 200?
This is the reason behind the recent activist trend of gluing their own bodies to the pavement.
What is climate change?
No. Nick, what is stupidity?
Yes. I'll take Instagram crackers for 200.
This phrase can be found in every white Christian girl's social media bio.
What is saved by grace?
That's the one.
Instagram crackers for 400.
This DM author is notorious for addressing their potential victims as hey girly or hey hun.
What is a boss babe?
Correct.
Let's go, how is this real for 400?
Recently making headlines, this readily available substance can be sweet, but lethal.
What is fentanyl?
No. Nick,
what is Panera Bread's lemonade?
That's the one.
How is this real 600?
The Biden administration has made it a priority to invest over $6 billion in this.
What are homeless veterans?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh, come on.
What is the border crisis?
Also no.
Nick, what is a high-speed train from Los Angeles to Sin City?
That's it. Who cares for 400?
A new spin-off restaurant that nobody asked for. Nick,
what is Cosmix?
You got it. Nick, you're up.
I'll do All I Want for Christmas for 200.
The person we love to hear from the most around Christmas season.
What is a family member?
Nope.
Nick, who is Mariah Carey?
Mariah Carey is correct. Nick, your go.
How is this real for 800?
Daily Deuce. And it has a video clue attached to it, where this mythical number originated from.
Over $1.3 billion.
What is Mesopotamia?
It's not your Daily Deuce. You don't get to try.
What is dementia?
Correct.
Dementia. Annoyances for 200.
This NFL team is known for its rowdy fans.
Nick, who is Time Person of the Year, Taylor Swift's boyfriend's brother's team?
Yes, we also would have accepted the Eagles.
Annoyances for 400.
This culture has unanimously been deemed the worst.
Anyone
care to take a guess? We were looking for what is tipping culture.
Oh.
to Times Square. It's That Kevin Show. Kevin McCullough, glad to have you here. ThatKevinShow.com. That Kevin Show on all socials. ThatKevinShow@gmail if you want to email. Do people still email? I'm not sure. I think they do. Anyway, each week we love to check in with the incredible work that's going on at the Independent Women's Forum. And I have to say that this week, when the president was in that room surrounded by women from America who were finally heard, finally had their voice heard with the signing of his executive order to basically protect women's spaces. It felt like a long bunch of work we've done on this show for the last 4 or 5 years had come to fruition, and was so proud of not just the president's leadership on this, but his willingness to invite those women to be there. Almost every one of them in the room had some sort of story that was associated with the subject matter. And for the tin ear that we were given in the campaign by the Democrats, it was just disgusting. And that's why I want to continue my partnership with Independent Women's Forum, their good work. And joining me this time is Meaghon Mobbs. She's the director for the Center for American Safety and Security. She kind of handles all those national security issues that the Women's Forum works on. And Meaghon, before we get to the discussion of USAID and some of those foreign funding priorities, because I'm loving what Elon Musk is doing. We'll talk about why we should in a second. Give me your thoughts as part of IWF on how historic what President Trump did this week.
So, Kevin, first off, thank you for having me. Thank you for all the work that you've done with independent women, elevating these voices and making sure they're heard. I mean, quite frankly, it's ludicrous this even had to happen, right? To have the acknowledgement of biological sex, to just acknowledge reality. The fact we had to have the president of the United States do that is truly crazy. I mean, it just shows how far left the left has actually gotten. But thank gosh that it's a return to common sense. It's restoring faith that we can actually believe in our government to do what's right. And like you said, seeing all those women, and especially those young girls surrounding the president. I am a mother of 2 girls, knowing that their future is secure, that women's spaces are secure and their voices are heard again, is just an unbelievable victory for everyone.
Yeah, no, it was. And I've probably allocated more airtime to that issue over the last 4 years than any other broadcaster or show in the country. And it only is motivated by one thing. I have a daughter, and the world that I leave for her, I'm responsible for. And if I can't fight with all my might every day for her welfare, I have 2 sons as well. I don't want them growing up in a confused world. But there was something extremely urgent and dynamic about this issue that I'm pro-life, I'm pro-America. I fight the good fight on all the fronts that conservatives are worried about. This issue was different, and it was the safety of our daughters that was at stake. And I'm never going to apologize for 1 ounce of it. And thank you to the Independent Women's Forum for coming along at the time that you did and having the voice that you had, because without you guys, we would not have gotten where we got this week with the president. I'm confident of that. Let me shift gears a little bit, but it's actually not that big of a shift when I think about it. USAID and foreign funding, we are finding out, had all kinds of stuff in it that should have never had any of it be involved. And it's not unrelated to what we were just talking about. When Caroline Leavitt put out that list this week of where some of this stuff was going, transgender surgeries in other countries, plays about transgenderism, all kinds of, politically correct stuff that is viewing gender through this grid of 57 options instead of 2 biological sexes. We were exporting this, Meaghon. It wasn't that we were just putting it into our own country and bothering our own girls with this. We were trying to get other people to come to that viewpoint.
And I think that's the most dangerous thing right there, Kevin, is that we are trying to export progressive ideals to countries that did not want them. And certainly it eroded our soft power, right? You're having the kind of outcry now that soft power is important. And what soft power is, Kevin, I'm sure you know, but soft power is this idea that we wield influence through other programs unrelated to the military, which is what we would call hard power, or sanctions would be considered hard power. So JFK established USAID at the time to try to counter the Soviet Union during the Cold War with soft power, economic incentives, programming to counter their messaging. Clearly, we have moved so far afield from that effort, it's ludicrous. And in fact, I would say we're not even doing anything related to soft power anymore. If anything, we're eroding our ability to project any type of power, hard, soft, to these countries who don't want or need that. And instead, we gave it to all of these programs like you just mentioned, exported it, and now you're even hearing those countries come out and say, well, goodness gracious, we never wanted this. We needed money for XYZ thing, and instead you gave it to these other programs.
Yeah. No, my 15-year-old walked into the kitchen last night just before dinner, and he was like, Dad, what's up with USAID? Didn't really know much about it, hadn't. And I just sat back and let my bride talk to him about it, because she was like, people give to it and they think that we're giving, food supplies and emergency shelter and helping people out of earthquakes and all the rest of that stuff, which I don't know if any of the money we were spending currently went to any of those types of things. And then we started telling him about some of the things that it was going to, and his eyes grew as big as tennis balls. I mean, it's like nobody in their right mind thinks that any of this stuff was good. And yet this was the issue that the Democrats decided to protest this week about. I mean, of all the fights you're going to pick about what Elon Musk is doing, you're going to go after him for getting rid of this?
Absolutely. So, and I will say, this is actually the great tragedy. When there is a failure of accountability, the most vulnerable suffer. There was money going to some of these important programs, HIV prevention under PEPFAR, which was critically necessary. We saw Senator Bill Cassidy come out in support of that. Some of the funding did go to those that are starving, though oftentimes, by the way, and this is the other issue. With conditions, and or there was no outcomes measuring how that money actually was impacting the people that needed it the most. And I think that's what people are enraged about. Americans are an extraordinary, generous people. We're compassionate. We want to help those. We deeply believe to those who much is given, much is expected. That's not what this was anymore. And that's the biggest issue. And I find that to be the most tragic part about all of this, because again, the most vulnerable are going to suffer because of progressive projects that took away the core meaning of this agency.
It's really remarkable when you break it down like that. Foreign funding, for a variety of reasons, has been problematic, and there's been a few voices on Capitol Hill. Rand Paul comes to mind, of people that have really tried to reform what we're doing. But why do we give so much federal money to other countries? And I'm hearkened back to the there was a major tsunami that happened in Southeast Asia years ago. The Bush administration was in office at the time, and I remember the American president being pilloried through the global press for us not giving more money formally from, in fact, I think we gave some of the least amount in terms of government money to them. And the president was asked about that. And he basically said, look, Americans are generous people. They're going to give from their own pockets far more than anything that the government could do. And then when it was all done and all of the calculations had been made from all the countries, the U.S. blew away every other country on the map in terms of total dollars given. But only a small slice of it came from the federal government. The rest came from private organizations that people were giving money to because they trusted them. The Red Cross, or a charity that I believe in, like World Vision, or some of those that would have been involved in that. And that allows me as the donor to trust the people that I'm giving it
to. Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. From New York, That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back, Times Square. Kevin McCullough, glad you're with us, trying to liven up your day. And I'm so grateful that the Independent Women's Forum checks in with us each week. And Meaghon Moms is the director for the Center for American Safety and Security. Part of our safety and security is negotiated through foreign agreements with countries. Sometimes we tell them in very harsh terms what we're going to do and what they're going to do, and sometimes we use more persuasive methods. But Meaghon, those persuasive methods have been hijacked by people that are trying to do things that are utterly un-American in other countries. We do this with the same Mexico City funding thing that comes in. Every Democrat that comes to office, executive order reassigns Mexico City abortion policy. And then every conservative that comes back to office undoes it with another executive order. But that's just one example of us trying to insert our will onto other countries that we think aren't doing the right thing. And when it came to the Biden administration and how this was all being overseen, we were exporting values that most of America doesn't agree with. So what should be done long term to our whole approach to how we use what you called soft power, foreign funding? How do we influence these nations going forward in a way that really is accountable to the people of America and exports the values that we believe in?
So first off, we got to get back to accountability. I think Senator Ernst has been also leading this charge around foreign funding. You were talking about kind of key stakeholders earlier. The reality is we can't stop foreign funding for a whole host of reasons. One, certainly China's not, right? Their Belt and Road Initiative all around the world, they're trying to counter American influence, counter Western ideals, true Western ideals, not progressive ideals, true Western ideals. They're trying to do that. Certainly Russia's doing the same. So we have to be very mindful of the fact that there are other countries that are trying to fill the gaps or the void that we've left. And that gap and void was unfortunately a product of what we just talked about, which is that these foreign aid dollars, which should have been tied to specific outcomes, accountable for what they were doing, and if not, pulled back and or reallocated, made sure they were going to the appropriate end user. If we can't do all of that, then we shouldn't be giving any, but that's what the goal should be. It should be accountable, outcome-driven, process-driven, with a specific goal in mind, accountable to the American people and our values and ideals. That's what we need to get back to.
Do you think Elon will get there?
I think it's going to take some time. And I think the problem with the time portion, and I think the reason why it's going to take time is not anything to do with him, just because there's so much unwinding that has to happen. There is so much here.
We're still digging up the bodies.
Exactly. And it's not just this agency, by the way, Kevin. This is going to be across agencies where I think people are going to recognize how much money is going to programs that never should have existed in the first place.
No, I think that this disruption period of the Trump second term is going to last for a while, months into years, in terms of finding all the bad behavior and rooting it out. I do think we get there before the midterms. I hope that we do. And I hope that we have a track record to present to the voters and say, hey, if it hadn't been for us, none of this would have been uncovered. But along those lines, I think that the media is going to try to work against the discovery and then the actions taken against this stuff. Do we have a strong enough hand with the integrity of our efforts with Elon? Because people have said, well, he's not elected. I mean, I don't think anybody that voted in the presidential election thought that Elon wasn't going to be part of the new government coming in. But he's not. You're hearing a lot of congressional members whine and cry about this. But is it just just the wind really amounting to nothing as they go about it?
So I think what you're going to see, actually, Kevin, is the strength of the American people. Americans have been hurting. They feel like their pocketbooks have been affected, and they are shocked, truly shocked at what's happening. And I think that they are willing to see this kind of really aggressive behavior because they are hurting and they want to know where their money is going. And the reality is you're seeing it on all social media platforms, average Americans who weren't previously.
Well, I want some back. Yeah, tell me where it's been.
Yeah,
give it back to me. I'll spend it better than they did.
Well, the American people should have, again, that accountability, transparency, and the ability to trust in their government. And I think sometimes you do have to break things in order to put them back together again.
This might be a bit spicier, but I'm wondering your answer to it. One of the USAID discoveries was a document that showed, I think it was 40 million, something along those lines, that went directly to the virology lab in Wuhan, and Fauci had to sign off on it. And everything that he told Congress was the opposite. No, I didn't know anything about gain of function. We didn't do anything. We found a receipt, like a legit receipt that said this is where this money went. And the person that we gave it to ended up being patient one in the COVID pandemic. Should Fauci be held accountable for this? Is there some way that we can recall him and say we got to get justice for this? Because my tax dollars paid for people to die. I'm not proud of that, but Fauci was the funnel through which this came about, and the corruption. I mean, to that degree, I can't sit still on that.
Stick around for more of That Kevin. Next, That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough. Here he is from New York. That Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back to Times Square. It's Kevin McCullough, and as we've already made a couple of mentions throughout the show this weekend, this was a huge week for women and for girls in our nation's capital and across the country as the president went and signed the executive order saying no more men in women's safe spaces, no more men in women's locker rooms, on the field of play, in the showers, everywhere else that men have been over the last 4 years kind of allowed to invade because of very un-American policies President Trump reversed. And I think this is interesting because if you'll remember, one of the knocks that the Democrats tried to use against him in the campaign is that how women hated him. Women hate this man. How's they ever going to support him? Didn't look like that to me. I think they had 1,000 people crammed into the West Wing when he did the signing this week. Someone who was in the room when it happened, not Alexander Hamilton, Alexandra Bougher is back with us. Hello, lady.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me back.
What was it like to be there? You and your daughter were attendees, and you were like right behind the president at the moment of the speech and the signing. What was the electricity in the room like?
I mean, that's the perfect word. It was electric. It's funny. So my daughter's 11, and we've been so lucky to have met President Trump a few times at some different events. And the kids always ask, when are we going to get to meet him? And I said, one of these days it's going to happen. So when we received the invitation to join, we were extremely excited. But it was funny because the girls were acting sort of like all very cool when they got to the White House. And then all of a sudden we're, on these risers and the music plays and they say, here is the 47th president of the United States. And you see him walk out and you felt it was like a ripple on the risers. The girls were like beaming with excitement, huge smiles on their faces. They were so excited. Some were grabbing each other's hands. So they were truly, truly excited, not only for this, historic signing, but just to see the president himself in person.
Well, and I thought it was very endearing when he sat down at the desk to do the signing, and then he said, "Why don't you guys come, gather around?" And again, for all the Democrats that talked about how much women hate this man, you didn't see any of that or feel any of that this week. I do want to go to a point that I felt like maybe it was Riley said in one of the interviews afterwards, because Riley Gaines was really the force du jour that just willed this issue into the American forefront in terms of getting it on people's radar. And for good reason. She was cheated out of a national championship because of it. But I think one of the things that some of the girls were saying in their news hits is that it's really a wonderful day, a historic day, an important day, also a very sad day, that you had to have the leader of the free world use an executive order power to protect women. Like, how did we get to this place, Alexandra?
That's very correct. And, it wasn't very exciting, and we're very happy to have turned it around. But that's a question that we often ask ourselves. How are we even here? Why is it something that we're even fighting over? It seems pretty common sense to me that it should be girls and women in women's sports and, boys and men in men's sports, and that's it. And there's a lot of young ladies that have lost titles, that have lost scholarships, that have gotten very hurt. Peyton McNabb was there as well. And, she had half her body paralyzed and some brain damage. And thankfully, she's working really hard to fight her way back and get better. But, so while there's this excitement, yes, we have to remember that a lot of people, I don't know to say their lives were ruined in some ways, right? And what about the confidence of young ladies? We tell especially our youngest ladies that they can do whatever they put their mind to, and work really hard, and you can attain your goals. And then in Riley's case, for instance, this boy who really wasn't like the best swimmer on the men's team, all of a sudden is number one in the women's team. And something that I remember her saying to me at another Moms for Liberty event was that they're in the water every day just to shave off this like eighth of a millisecond. And here this guy comes in. This isn't even his swim. Like, I don't even think he normally did the butterfly. I don't remember exactly what he normally does, but you wouldn't normally just switch, the type of swimming that you're doing. He switched and then he blew their times away.
Yeah.
Men are built differently than women, and that's why we have, the separate sports.
Well, and it's in a sport like swimming where there's not a lot of contact or anything like that. There's not as big of a fear of physical jeopardy, but certainly in things like volleyball and some of the other sports that this has reared its head in. You mentioned Peyton; she's been on the show a few times. But what a tough life. All she really enjoyed doing was playing sports. And then in one hit of volleyball against her head by a guy that should have never been on the same court with her, she loses all of it. And she may never get to play another sport again at all. So it's legitimate damage, and it is a horrendous thing. I was very pleased, though, that after the president's signing, although I think they were total pieces of garbage for taking so long to even do this, the NCAA and several school leagues and high school associations and so forth across the country did immediately adopt the new language of the executive order, and so that went into effect almost immediately. But I still think the NCAA owes those athletes some explanation. For instance, if you try to make this right, you don't get to keep Leah Thomas as the winner of that 200 butterfly. That's Riley Gaines. Riley Gaines is the outright winner of that event and should have been the national championship. Should have been the national champion uncontested. They didn't even give her a trophy. They tied. They were down to the 100th of a second as a tie, and they didn't give her the trophy. They gave it to him. Totally unfair. What's next on this front? Do you think there are still groups that are going to try to work this stuff back into the curriculums? And if so, what are groups like Moms for Liberty doing to prepare for it?
Yeah, you're correct. The other side never takes a day off. They're very quick. We've all, just in New Jersey alone, Sean Spiller put something out saying that, basically that his job is to protect all students and, putting the bill down. And again, just bringing up these transgender students. We want to protect all children, but not at the cost of the other children.
It's a much brighter day in America. Alexandra Bougher, thank you for your contribution to it. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much.
You got it. Kevin McCullough coming back from Times Square. Don't go away.